Hey, welcome back everyone. This is Uncle Frank, and I am not a financial advisor, nor is any of the content to be construed as financial advice. This channel is for entertainment purposes only. Okay, guys, before we get into the market, I have to review just a small sample of the distraction headlines that are out there right now. There's something for everyone. If there was ever an indicator we have a swan on the way, this would be it, in my opinion. Just an avalanche of salacious headlines. Every single member of the DNA tester 23andMe board has resigned. The board of directors for 23andMe has quit following disagreements over the CEO's plans to privatize the DNA testing company. A retired upstate New York judge and former prosecutor allegedly shot himself to death Tuesday morning in a shootout with FBI agents trying to bust him on bribery and corruption charges, according to sources. Stuart Rosenwasser, who had been embroiled in a sordid federal bribery scandal, allegedly opened fire on the agents as they approached his Orange County home before his death by apparent suicide shortly after 9:30 a.m., law enforcement sources told the Post. A male prostitute has come forward and provided federal investigators with a videotape allegedly showing one of beleaguered rapper Sean Diddy Combs' infamous freak-offs, according to a new report. The sex worker met with federal investigators working on the sex trafficking case against Diddy in New York on Wednesday. He provided them a copy of a freak-off tape that Diddy, 54, allegedly made in May of 2023. On topic, strange cellmates in a Brooklyn jail. Sean Combs and Sam Bankman-Fried. Mr. Combs is sleeping in the same dormitory-style room as Mr. Bankman-Fried, the crypto mogul who was convicted of fraud. It just keeps getting better. Caroline Ellison, former Alameda Research CEO and star witness in the Sam Bankman-Fried prosecution, was sentenced to 2 years and ordered to forfeit $11 billion for her role in FTX's collapse. Judge Lewis Kaplan delivered a harsher sentence than the no prison recommendation from federal probation, citing the need to deter future fraudsters. Ellison had cooperated extensively with authorities, providing critical evidence which contributed to Bankman-Fried's conviction. Ellison, who expressed remorse in court, remains free on bail until her surrender in November. New York City Mayor Eric Adams pleaded not guilty Friday to federal bribery charges, firmly rejecting allegations that he accepted overseas travel, campaign cash, and other perks from foreign interests, seeking to harness his influence. Adams, a former police captain, entered the plea in a packed courtroom that's just a short walk from City Hall, which has been roiled in recent weeks by a cascade of investigations, searches, and subpoenas. The first-time Democrat maintains he did nothing wrong and has vowed to stay in office, rebuffing growing calls for him to quit. His appearance before U.S. Magistrate Judge Catherine Parker came a day after prosecutors unsealed an indictment accusing him of taking $100,000 in flights and stays in opulent hotel suites from people tied to Turkey, and fueling his run for mayor with illegal donations that helped him qualify for more than $10 million in public campaign funds. Interesting that the DOJ only leaped into action after the mayor pushed back on illegal immigration policies. Speaking of New York City, disgraced ex-COVID czar Dr. Jay Varma may have perjured himself by repeatedly testifying under oath that vaccination is the only way to stop the spread of coronavirus, critics said. Varma, who served as ex-Mayor Bill de Blasio's senior health advisor during the heart of the pandemic and was caught in recently released hidden camera video boasting about attending drug-fueled sex parties during the pandemic, confessed in the footage that natural immunity to the deadly virus is just as good as the jab. And things are not settling down in the Middle East. I'm telling you guys, they are planning to get the U.S. in the fight, and they're targeting Iran. Terror chief dead. Hezbollah vows to avenge death of its longtime leader after Israel airstrike in Beirut. His death is considered a major victory in their ongoing campaign against hostile regional forces in the aftermath of Hamas's deadly October 7th assault on Israel. Here's the important part. Iran's supreme leader moved to secure location as he calls for Middle East to support Hezbollah. And from just 2 hours ago, Houthi rebels have claimed they fired a ballistic missile at Tel Aviv airport as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was landing back in Israel following a short visit to the United States. Okay, finally, after all that bullshit, was the headline Uncle Frank was waiting for on PCE. NASDAQ moves lower, Fed's preferred inflation gauge falls more than projected. U.S. stocks traded mixed midway through trading, with the Dow Jones Index surging more than 250 points on Friday. The Dow traded up 0.66% to 42,452, while the NASDAQ fell 0.45% to 18,108. The S&P 500 also fell, dropping 0.07% to 5741. According to government data released Friday, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, or PCE, increased by 2.2% in August compared to the same period last year. The reading was below the 2.3% analysts were expecting, and a drop from July's 2.5%. The core PCE, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, was 2.7% year over year in August, matching analyst expectations and 0.1% higher than July's number. Now, here's the narrative. This is what they want you to think. This is like it's from a script from Reuters. Dow advances to record high after inflation report. Small caps outperform. That's the rotation we're all looking for. The blue chip Dow rose on Friday to hit an intraday record, and small cap stocks outperformed after a benign inflation report cleared the way for the Fed Reserve to focus on shoring up the labor market while continuing its interest rate easing. A Commerce Department's report showed that consumer spending increased moderately in August, suggesting the economy retained some of its solid momentum in the third quarter, while inflation pressures continued to abate. The Russell 2000 index, which tracks small caps that fare better in a low-rate environment, gained 1.5% to a one-week high. 10 out of the 11 S&P 500 sectors were higher, led by a 2% rise in energy stocks, while technology stocks declined 1%. NASDAQ components such as Nvidia and Microsoft lost 2.7 and 0.5% respectively as investors turned their focus to other sectors. Financial stocks, including Goldman Sachs, and healthcare stocks like United Health, were the biggest boosts to the Dow. Investors now slightly favor a bigger 50 basis point cut at the Fed's next meeting, with a 52.1% chance, up from a coin toss before the data, as per the CME Group's FedWatch tool. Cooling price pressures gave the Fed enough room to commence its policy easing cycle with a 50 basis point cut last week. Focus will now shift to a slew of labor market reports due next week. Okay, guys, PCE cleared the way. Now the conversation shifts to a soft landing and employment data because the election is upon us. I don't care what you trade. Every trader needs to know what's coming and when, or you could walk right into a chainsaw. We need to first talk about next week, and then we're going to cover what I say is the hairiest fourth quarter I've ever seen. Now, I want to show you something interesting about the last day of the month, the last day of the third quarter, Monday, September 30th, and the first 4 days of October. I call it the U.S. Employment Shit Show Week. Monday, September 30th, Fed Reserve Governor Bauman's going to speak at 8:50, but then Jay Powell himself will speak at 1:55. Tuesday, October 1st, 9:40 a.m., we'll get final U.S. manufacturing PMI, but at 10 it begins. Job openings. Wednesday, 8:15, ADP employment data. Thursday, 8:30, initial jobless claims. And then Friday, October 4th, 8:30 a.m., the U.S. employment rate and report. Guys, I can't emphasize enough how explosive employment data has now become. The feds want us to believe inflation is behind us, and Friday's PCE may have been the last word on that. But now they have to start juggling jobs data, and I mean every day. Now let's look at Q4. At the time of this recording, there is no Fed meeting scheduled for October. Go look at the FOMC meeting schedule and see for yourself. So we may have to wait until November for the second cut if we're going to get another one, or maybe they'll schedule a meeting suddenly. But this is where we're at for now. You might be surprised to learn the FOMC holds 8 regularly scheduled meetings every year. Now, September 30th marks the end of the third quarter, a vital date for AMC shareholders. While it hasn't been announced, I currently forecast AMC third Q24 earnings to be released around November 13th. Zax thinks we're going to lose 9 cents per share. I think we're going to post a surprise profit, not investment advice or advisor. Back on August 8th, Judge Torres announced the fine against Ripple XRP. So the SEC had 60 days from there to appeal. So we can estimate that deadline to be around October 7th or approximately 9 days from now. But I think we could see that news Friday the 4th or even sooner. Now, Thursday, October 10th, 8:30 a.m., initial jobless claims and CPI next week. Friday, October 11th, producer price index and consumer sentiment. October 15th and 16th is Ripple's Swell Conference in Miami. October 22nd to the 24th is the BRICS Summit in Russia. Did you notice the Ripple Conference is exactly 1 week before the BRICS Conference, and now that XRP has been deemed not a security, they may release some explosive shit ahead of the BRICS Summit. Please understand, we could get some earth-shattering and market-roiling headlines out of the BRICS conference and right before the election. This could profoundly affect crypto, precious metals, the U.S. bond and stock markets, not to mention the dollar. I expect Archer Aviation's next earnings release to land around November 6th, 7th, or possibly the following week, the 14th. That hasn't been confirmed. We are only 38 days to the November 5th election. Did you know the next Fed meeting is scheduled for November 6th and 7th, the day following the election? I wonder what they're trying to tell us with that. If Trump wins, we know it's time for Gensler to spruce up that resume because he's getting shit canned. How will that affect crypto markets? GameStop's next earnings date is unconfirmed for December 3rd or 4th after market hours. By the way, December 17th and 18th will be the last FOMC meeting of the year, and that very same week, Friday the 20th, well, that's the last quadruple witching day of the year. So why do I do events calendars for you? Because I believe there's a 90% chance of one or more white or black swan events for the fourth quarter. By the way, we are 114 days from inaugurating a new president January 20th. So, Uncle Frank, why are you still pointing to black swans as the only thing that can truly impact our enemies? Here's why. JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, B of A, and other systemically important U.S. banks are now financing $2.42 trillion in leverage bets on Wall Street, according to new numbers self-reported by the industry. FINRA says data updated through the end of June shows the big banks' total margin loans to hedge funds are at a record high, according to numbers dating back to March of 2013. Pay attention, guys. Both U.S. and foreign banks are fueling large levels of leverage in American markets, with foreign systemically important banks financing an additional $1.54 trillion in margin debt. Margin debt played a major role in the 2008 financial crisis, as outlined in a 2014 study from the Fed Reserve Bank of San Francisco. Quote, hedge funds may be the most important transmitters of shocks during crises, more important than commercial banks or investment banks. Hedge funds are opaque and highly leveraged. If highly leveraged hedge funds are forced to liquidate assets at fire sale prices, these asset classes may sustain heavy losses. This can lead to further defaults or threaten systemically important institutions, not only directly as counterparties or creditors, but also indirectly through asset price adjustments. One channel for this risk is the so-called loss and margin spiral. In this scenario, a hedge fund is forced to liquidate assets to raise cash to meet margin calls. The sales of those assets increases the supply on the market, which drives prices lower, especially when market liquidity is low. This in turn leads to more margin calls on other financial institutions, creating a downward spiral. The stock market's euphoria-driven record highs are at risk of a painful downturn, Black Swan Investors says. Stocks have hit record highs this year, and they've entered the Goldilocks zone, according to Mark Spitznagel. He says investors are overly confident amid immediate positive catalysts like rate cuts and disinflation. Spitznagel thinks they should focus instead on lagging drivers that could spur a sharp stock downturn. Okay, let's start with AMC. AMC Theaters chief Adam Aron projects bright future for cinemas with massive upgrades. Talks debt extension. Also from last week, AMC stock has tumbled. CEO Adam Aron says he'll have much to say on the company's fourth quarter earnings call. As long as this con man pervert is in charge, he will continue to string the shareholders along. We will remain in debt even if our terms improve, and he will relentlessly spend and pay himself and his management team at outrageous levels. The very definition of a zombie company and stock, which was his plan from the pandemic. In that year, while COVID raged, while theaters were shut down for part of the year, while we were being starved for movie releases from Hollywood, his pay plan more than doubled. Now ask yourself, if you were running AMC during the lockdowns, would you have doubled your salary? Only if you were running an enrichment scheme or planned to bust out the company for private equity firms like Apollo Global Management. The only hope I see for AMC is it could track GME up on a Ryan Cohen announcement. It could pop on earnings, but can we trust Adam Aron with any good news? Because we haven't been able to in the past. Or we could get a white or black swan event that takes control and the decision away from Adam and the hedge funds, who are leveraged 60 to 1 or even higher. Speaking of Apollo, you might be interested to learn they've recently joined forces with our chief investment banker, Citi, a notorious short seller of AMC, the investment bankers responsible for the ape and the reverse split. Also coming up in October is Bill Wang's sentencing. A judge scheduled sentencing for October 28th, and Wang faces up to 20 years in prison for each charge, meaning he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. You may remember it's Archegos that ultimately took down Credit Suisse, another short seller of AMC. Bill's lawyers wanted to bring in the recent Morgan Stanley case, where their institutional block trading department was giving tips to hedge funds, Citadel among them. The judge didn't allow it, to my knowledge, and an employee from Morgan Stanley Institutional Trading still runs the AMC board of directors to this day. So, Uncle Frank, what's going on with the CAT system? Well, we've got 3 scheduled events, monthly updates for October 1st, November 2nd, and December 1st. As long as Gary the Crap Weasel Gensler controls the data, I think the bad actors are safe for now. Now, according to Bank of America, today's market is a bubble dream with rate cuts, China inflating economy, but also from B of A, Bank of America suspends bankers following probe into Asian stock offerings. And then Berkshire Hathaway sells more Bank of America stock as streak hits 9 days. This is the past 24 hours, guys. From the Chronicle of Philanthropy, money is power. 44 ultra-wealthy philanthropists are top political donors this election cycle. Mega donors like Ken Griffin, Paul Singer, Michael Bloomberg, and Reid Hoffman are collectively giving hundreds of millions to candidates and super PACs to influence voters. Who's the number one donor? I'll give you a hint. He's been accused of violating the securities rules and laws 60 times over the past 15 years and desperately needs to buy another get-out-of-jail-free card. Now I'd like to briefly cover Archer Aviation, my number one pick for 2025. After 5 attempts to close the stock under 3 since late May, they finally pushed it under on the 25th. But then on Friday, news broke that Archer was scheduled to meet with analyst firm Benchmark, who presently maintains a buy rating on the stock with a price target of 12. The stock leapt up to 318, then the shorts borrowed millions of shares, dumped them on the open market, pounded the stock back down to 307, still up 15 cents or 5.14% for the day. Now, for my Archer fans, I want you to know institutions hold 153,377,000 shares. And if you divide that by shares outstanding of 319,446,000, you get 48%, or nearly half the float. But did you know that just 24 insiders own 34.56% of the shares outstanding? Let's drill down on that. So just for fun, I would like to review the common stock purchases for 2024 for Archer's manufacturing partner, Stellantis. I'm sure this means nothing, but bear with me. On March 8th, they purchased 3.6 million shares for about $15.6 million. On March 12th, they purchased 1.6 million shares for about $7.5 million. On March 14th, they purchased 1.6 million shares for $8.2 million. Then on March 18th, purchased 1.5 million shares for $7.6 million. Then on July 3rd, they purchased 17,400,000 shares for just under $55 million. And on August 9th, they purchased 2.98 million shares for $9,989,000. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Stellantis now owns over 26% of this company. I'm not saying nothing. That's followed by Cathie Wood's ARC owning 8.16%. Let that sink in. Hey, I want to thank you for watching, and please remember to hit the like button after this slide if you enjoyed the presentation. Subscribe to the channel and set the alert so you're notified when I have new information to share. See you at the bell.